Hi there, welcome back to the Rare Book Views channel, where hopefully I'm going to show you some rare books. I'll give you some thoughts on rare books, we'll give you some rare thoughts on books, and hopefully you can comment back and share some with me. If you're interested in that, go ahead and subscribe. Today, I had a request, and somebody asked me about how to get started enjoying the classics. And since it's October and we're getting into fall and Halloween time, I thought I'd give you some ideas of some seasonal books to get you into the mood to read some classics. I love classics, but I also love some regular fiction, and I know why. I think that when we think about classics, we think that the language can be so unfamiliar that reading can feel kind of hard. So, and sometimes it's not true. Sometimes they're very readable. The stories are usually really good, and that's why these books are still around, why they still have so many readers, because they're great. It's just sometimes you have to invest a little bit. So I'm going to let you know which ones might be the biggest investment and which ones might be towards the easier side in order, I think, from my personal experience. And then I really want to hear your thoughts. If you've read any of these books, let me know if you think that I'm getting close to how much of a challenge they are. Okay? First up, Dracula. This is a vintagey copy. These are actually kind of hard to find in vintage. Dracula is a great book. It is, for me, the ones we're going to talk about today, this is the farthest along on this sort of caramel apple challenge scale. It's a great story. It's very interesting. It's based on, there's a lot of vampire stories. This is kind of the culmination, the pinnacle of the stories, I think. This was written in mid-late 1800s, if my memory is right, and it is letters and diaries and newspapers. So not only is it sort of not our current language, but it's not a normal narrative style. So it can be, it feels to me like a little bit of a mystery. But there are a lot of movies based on this version. So if you are a little bit intimidated, but you really want the story, you could watch the movie, and then if you zone out at all when you're reading the book, you won't get lost because you'll know the plot. There's a hilarious 1990s version with, I think, Keanu Reeves. So that is my suggestion. It is a great book. It is a great story. I'm going to mention that Bram Stoker, who wrote this, says that he was influenced by a book called The Vampire, Pyre, which came out earlier in the 1900s. I'm going to mention that for a reason. Stick a pin in it. Next up, Frankenstein. I think this, for me, this is maybe half a step easier or more approachable in language, but it's such a creepy idea. It's amazing to think there was a time when this was a new ghost story idea, that someone's just gonna knit somebody back to Humpty Dumpty, someone back together. This is a Heritage Press version. Heritage Press often really cool classics in a slipcase with really good illustrators. Frankenstein, no exception. This one is a little bit hard to find. I think Heritage Press might be in the $10 to $20 range on, say, eBay for any of the titles. Frankenstein is going to run you a little bit more. It's got these cool illustrations, just because it's very desirable. There aren't a lot of vintage copies of Frankenstein that I've seen, so I think this is a really nice one to have if you get the chance to pick one up. Frankenstein was written by Mary Shelley earlier in the 1800s. I think the language is a little bit easier to deal with, but it's still just not how we talk. So this is not reading Pulp Fiction. This is going to be, you're going to have to put your thinking cap on. Now, this I think is so cool. So Mary Shelley, when she was maybe a teenager, really bad weather, hanging out with some friends, 3 of them decided, it's horrible bleak weather, let's have a contest. Who can write the scariest ghost story? And she wrote Frankenstein, and one of her friends wrote Vampire, which ended up influencing, as I said, Dracula. So out of order only because I would put Dracula as just a little bit harder than Frankenstein, but definitely check it out, it's cool. Next, Edgar Allan Poe. This, I have more than one copy of Poe, of course. This is a vintage copy, but it's undated, so I actually don't know how old it is. But I think for Halloween, this is what you want. Some old paper, some marbling, some leather. This is a collection, Poe, short stories. So I think we're maybe another notch, maybe another 2 steps down the scale of easier to take on and read, and it's less investment. Because if you're going to read Poe around Halloween, you can just read one short story. My favorite is The Cask of Amantillado, which is a story about a man being bricked up in a wall with a bottle of wine. If you get lost in this one, and Poe is his language, wow. But there are a lot, because it's a very common short story to read in high school, college, there are a lot of guides to help you out with some of the subtle inferences or references so you won't get lost. If you don't know the story and you're reading it for the first time, you might want to check out an article or Wikipedia about what are they talking about. There's some references to the Masons and things like that in jokes that will seem hilarious if you know what they're talking about, and confusing if you don't. So I would definitely look up the story, get familiar with it. I think that there are cartoons or something, interpretations of these that you would be able to find on maybe YouTube. So just like Dracula, if you're going to go for Poe, you might want to figure out the plot before so you can enjoy it more when you're reading it. There's, of course, Poe, a lot of poetry. The Raven is his biggest hit, and there's a great one of the Halloween episodes of The Simpsons is The Raven. So I think that's also a fun carryover if you're going to pick that one. Okay. This one I read every Halloween. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. This is a pretty book. I got this at an auction with other books, so I can't really take credit for this. And it's so pretty that I like to pull it out and sort of look at it, but I don't read it because I'm afraid that I'm going to hurt it. So I have actually more than one copy. I have a modern-ish Arthur Rackham. Look at that illustration. The Horseman, so great. So this is a reader copy. I can read this one. And then naturally, I have another one. And this is also Heritage Press. This is the Sketchbook. So The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, Washington Irving, was part of a set of short stories. He didn't issue it separately. It was this book, the Sketchbook. Washington Irving, also early 1800s, he was the New York Times bestseller of his time. He was the guy, the best author. Everyone read his stuff. He's truly an American. They say that, some people think, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow was the first big, truly American book-written short story hit. This was worldwide. It was read by a lot of people. And he was, I think, living in England at the time, or maybe he had been in England collecting ideas and then wrote this. It got this set in the United States and has this Civil War reference because the head of this Horseman was supposed to be Hessian and had his head blown off with a cannonball. So it is very American. And Washington Irving, he was in his day, I think, John Grisham plus fill in the blank, super popular. This is very readable. And of course, almost all of us have seen some version of this made into a cartoon or a movie, or the great TV show Sleepy Hollow, which is hilarious, which I also really enjoy around Halloween. This one, the Heritage Press, really nice, actually has color illustrations. I don't know off the top of my head who the illustrator is, but they are pretty good. So this is another one that you could pick up probably on eBay. This is going to run you 10 to 20 this time of year. If you buy it in October, it might run you just a little bit more, but this is good. I like the illustrations. I like the other stories. And The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, written kind of contemporaneously with Rip Van Winkle, also a little bit of a creepy idea. So fantastic. I would say this might be one of my very favorite books of all time. I read this when it was fairly new as a kid, and I have to warn you, this is a young adult book and freaky. This is The House with the Clock in Its Walls. I love this book. I read it and scared the dickens out of myself as a kid. And this was published, John Bellairs, 1970s. And he had, I think there's 10 or 12 books in this series with these characters, and then he has other books as well. This obviously, many of us know, was made into a fantastic movie 3 years ago. Jack Black and other amazing people. So this is the easiest read that I'm going to talk about. It's not really a classic. Bordering on vintage. We're almost to 50 years. and I said I read it when it was new. So this is another one that it's really fun to read. I think it's a really fun read at Halloween. The illustrations are Edward Gorey. Edward Gorey, great illustrator, creepy as all of his stuff. Creepy, I think, is the theme. He did the illustrations, and he did these great frontispieces in a lot of the John Bellairs books. He had a couple other illustrators, but Edward Gorey, definitely top of the line. I have a lot of these books because I like to make room on my very full shelves for the books I loved as a kid, and because John Bellairs is so high on the list, I love his things. I have a lot of them. This is not a first edition. These books, very hard to get in hardcover. They didn't print a ton of them because I don't know, they weren't as popular as you would think that, and I wonder if it's because they're so creepy. Many of them have been lost to the times of libraries, so the hardcover is very difficult to come by. And even before the movie, hard for collectors because there are also Edward Gorey collectors. So a lot of people would like to have these books. I would say before the movie, this one, the headline, The House with the Clock in Its Walls, maybe $30 to $50, and now probably $100 in good condition, maybe more. So if you'd like a copy, it might be a little bit difficult, but it's worth it. And you can certainly get a paperback and read it and enjoy it. So if you want a Halloween recommendation, these are the ones that I think you should probably consider getting into as we get into October. If you have another book that you love to read in October or fall or Halloween, please let me know. I would love to have something to add to my list. And let me know if you read one of these and what you think, and if you enjoy them, and if it makes you want to fall in love with classics. And as always, happy reading.